It's time once again for the medley. I'm Blake Crash Priddle, and if I could sum up today's guest in just one word, it would be awesome. That's because this week we're going to be speaking with Axel Desarden, a keynote speaker, activist, and author originally from New York City. Today he's going to tell us all about how he was inspired to become a motivational speaker and a person that people can look up to and feel inspired by, as well as some of his literary pieces, including his latest book called Soulfire. Axel, thank you very much for joining us this week.
Well, thank you for having me, Blake.
How were you inspired to become a motivational speaker?
I guess it's a lot of introspection. I took a look at my life, and I started contemplating and asking questions of how can I make my life better. Not that I wasn't totally happy or completely unsatisfied, but we're always in a state of growth, and how do we give back? You reach a certain level in your life, Blake. I've been through a lot of stuff, and it becomes a thing where you reach a point where it's time to give back. And how do you do that? How do you enrich and empower somebody else? How do you take an unselfish approach so that you can continue to grow? These are questions that I ask myself. I wanted to see a change in society in general, just because you can sort of pick up how people, the general consensus of how a mindset is. And I wanted more for other people. I wanted people to experience the enlightenment and the enrichment that I went through. And so for me, the best way to do that is to, give back what I have. And so motivating people and seeing others do some self-reflection and some introspection and help them reach their goals, inspires me a lot. And that's really the fuel that's in my tank these days.
Did any of your stories inspire people in a way where they came to you and said, Axel, you've really changed my life. Thank you very much. And if so, could you shed some light on that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Pretty much most of the talks that, most of the assemblies or the addresses that I do, there's usually a few folks that come after the show and, they thank me, they tell me they're inspired. And ever so often there's 2 to 3 that actually pull me to the side just to speak in more confidence. And they tell me that, hey, when you said what you said and you shared and expressed what you went through, I felt like you were speaking directly to me because it's something very similar to what I'm either going through now or what I went through, or that I know of a friend or a family member who's gone through it. And I want to tell you that, it resonated deeply with me, and folks, when you're speaking in confidence, right, there's nobody else around. They really get to shed their skin and be themselves. And, I've had 1 or 2, who shed a tear and just out of the resonance of it. And in particular, I've had some struggles in my life. So, if one of the things I share in my talks, and I generally do this in a framework, because I don't want people to miss the message and get hung up on a story, is, at the age of 15, I was gunned down. And this stems from my first book, Distorted Perception of Innocence, and the title expresses the entire book, if you ask me. And I wasn't gunned down, this didn't occur in one day, Blake. This happened in the course of 2 weeks, actually, in August 15th, I'll never forget it, and August 30th of 1990. And August 15th, I was shot one time in my elbow. I managed to get away. And then 2 weeks later, I was gunned down. I was snuffed out. They tried to snuff me out. And I received 6, it was a hail of bullets. And this time it was 6 shots. And, here I thought, I had this totally distorted perception of what life was at this age growing up in the South Bronx. So after the first gunshot, I went to the hospital. I got stitched up. It grazed my elbow, the inner side of my left elbow. And the distorted part about it, Blake, was that I'm back on the streets, in the neighborhood, in my community, or as we call it, on the block. And I'm actually walking around like I'm donning a badge of honor, like I leveled up or something. I mean, this was my thinking back then, thinking that it was cool. I had a totally misconception of what of what life truly. I had no idea. And so 2 weeks later, this happens, and this really brings me to the brink of death. The Grim Reaper knocked on my door this time and said, "Hey, if you didn't get my message the first time, and the Grim Reaper dragged me away." And I woke up in the hospital bed with a 30% chance of living. This is what they told the surgeons and the doctors had told my mom, and I was short a kidney. 3 to 7 inches of my large intestines was removed, completely shattered. 70% of my liver was blown away, and the only thing that was on my side at the time was I had a little bit of weight on me in my youth. Right, so I was a little chubby. It wasn't too chubby. I was more of a husky, broad-shouldered kid, and my weight and my youth is what helped me survive that traumatic experience. And so when I share this and I express it with, especially with high school or senior high school students or freshman year college students, they relate to the aspect of the pain of and they resonate with the confusion and the contradiction that I was going through as I was growing up. One of the things that I mentioned in the talks that leads up to this gunshots is when I was 5 years old, I had a beautiful home. From what I remember, my dad was my hero. I had 2 sibling brothers, and my sister was the oldest. I'm the youngest. And so it's 4 of us in a 2-bedroom bronze apartment, my mom and dad. And Dad would always take us on Saturdays like clockwork. This is something I look forward to. He would take us to the video rental store, swinging onto my dad's hand and, walking through this neighborhood. It was about 10 blocks away. But we went and we got karate and kung fu movies, And so this was the highlight of my youth. And so the contradiction started to come in, but as I got a little bit older, I started to see his behaviors and his patterns started to change, and it was something I couldn't put a finger on it, but I was confused as to how he could be so happy, so generous, and so loving, and then do a complete 360 and it'd be like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and I would feel guilty as if, well, what did I do to piss Dad off? And as I came of age, I started to see more things. I started to see drinking, alcohol consumption, and I started kind of piecing things together. So that was a bit of a confusion and contradictory period of my life. Couple that in with 7 gunshots at the age of 15, it stunted my natural emotional development. And it really set me apart, set me on a different pathway. But the sad thing about it is that I thought it was okay. I thought that this was normal. At first, I didn't think so. But with everything in my environment being kind of the same, it seemed like the condition, like the norm. Right, I walked out of my, and as I got older, I started to see other things in the streets. I started seeing the drug dealing became more prominent. Violence and criminal activity and stuff, so forth. It's always been there. I just didn't see it because I was so young and sheltered and so fixated on family that it was a bit of a shock to my system as my awareness started to expand and unfold in my environment, and I started to tread waters on my own. A lot of the students and the audience members can resonate with the confusion and contradiction, the low self-esteem, the you know, the lack of confidence and not being able to effectively communicate or express what I'm going through because I'm still trying to make sense of it. All of this resonates with the audience with my typical target audience that I speak with. Now they didn't go through what I went through. They're obviously in school and in college, but they're able to connect some dots and to decipher some of the traumatic stuff that I've been through, and they're able to identify with the pain.
Did you ever end up using drugs or alcohol to help cope with these challenges that you were facing?
Yes, but not. It didn't start off as a coping mechanism. It really started as a recreation, sort of a thing to do. I wasn't the first and I wasn't the last one out of our group of guys that we grew up with in the streets. My friends, and I didn't start using out of pain. It really was just for recreation. This is what they did. This is what we did in the streets. And so the older guys, they would smoke weed, and they would drink 40 ounces, and it would be fun. It would be an outlet of just some sense of distorted joy. Let me just say it like that, because life at home wasn't as happy as it used to be when I was a kid, right? So coming out and hanging out with the guys, and a couple of them smoked weed. This is what they did back then. I started to engage, and it started to alter my frame of mind and my mood, and it was fun in the beginning. It was like I said, it was pure recreation. It really wasn't. It wasn't no peer pressure, nothing like that. But it's the old saying that if you hang out in a barbershop long enough, you're going to wind up taking a haircut. And so curiosity at that age led me to experiment, and it was fun in the beginning. It started to become a problem, and this is where the coping I started to use it for coping purposes. Was when I started detaching from the group so that I can just use on my own. Right? When I identified that a couple of years later, it was like, well, it was merely a thing for me to get away. I was literally trying to run from myself, which is absolutely impossible. And I make a reference to that in the first book, where you can just run as fast as you can, and you can stop in front of a mirror or see the reflection of a window, and there's no way you can outrun yourself, right? And so I started to use on that level to medicate, right? Because the pain was outweighing the pleasure at this point, and I didn't know what to do. My brothers were living their life in the neighborhood. They were off. They had their own story. My sister was always with my mom, and my dad was always, although he was a working man all his life, it just, he turned into this. He flipped from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and he had his own coping that he was dealing with. Like, who knows? I made sense out of the way I viewed him also years later, and I didn't hold it against him no more. I mean, this is the transformative part of where I've come to in my life, where I don't hold any resentments towards him. But at the time, I was upset because you was my man, you was my hero, and to see you totally flip to a different side is like I was hurt, and so I'm not the most important person in your life anymore. Right? Like I said, I was the youngest child, so I was spoiled with attention. But to not be your number one anymore left me a little bit lost in the sea. My landscape was pretty bare at this point, and so I identified with a lot of the guys that I grew up with because they had similar situations. Not all the same, but Like I said, it all boiled down to emotional disturbance and trying to make sense out of things. And so we all kind of identified in that area. But yeah, it became a problem when I started to use by myself and getting away from something that I could never get away from because I eventually had to make sense of it and face it down and gain some more introspection. But, as a 15-year-old, this is not what I'm thinking. 30 years later, I can make full sense of it and write dozens of books about it. But at the time it was tough. It was, it hurt. There was something I was longing for, there was a void that needed to be filled. And so I quickly started to adapt to the life in the streets and hanging out and became streetwise, and we did some things that we're not proud of, and I wasn't contributing to my community the way I would be now. I was just I was like a parasite. I was sucking the community dry. I wasn't adding to it. So yeah, to answer your question, I have used drugs, and there's no shame in me sharing that now because. Again, that's the hope that if somebody hears this, and I share this in some of my talks, depending on the audience, it'll give them some hope that, that if I got through it and I made sense of it and it's made me who I am today, then it's possible for you as well. So, in the midst of that storm or that, deep in that flame and in the embers of that fire, a lot of people can't see the hope. And so when I share that, whether it makes sense or resonates with somebody on a conscious level or subconsciously, it would probably ring a bell later on because some things we just don't get right away. But a couple of days, couple of weeks, months, maybe even a year later, people reflect, and I've gotten phone calls and emails to that effect where, hey, man, you mentioned some stuff last year. And I understand now. I understand. So it's like planting seeds and stuff like that. That with the hope that it'll germinate and grow to fruition later on.
You'd mentioned that you'd done a lot of presentations for schools, both high school and college. Where else have you done presentations? Have you done any at community centers or other places like that?
Yeah. That was doing presentations in the community centers and nonprofit organizations in the community. That was my humble beginnings. So that was actually my that was my stage for quite some time and my audience in the very beginning. And I probably did I don't know, I couldn't count them all in one finger. It might have been about 15, closer to 20 presentations at a lot of nonprofit organizations and community organizations, some drug rehabilitations, youth centers, and again, depending on the audience that I'm speaking to, will dictate which talk am I actually delivering, because I can't talk to a 12-year-old too in depth, about drug use. I can't plant those seeds, of course, and I can't. And I won't really speak to a 13-year-old about a 7-time gunshot traumatic experience without tweaking it and making it less horrid, for lack of a better word. But those were my humble beginnings, and I would go around and I would do 20, 25-minute talks, and then I would get invited. There would be one person or two people in that same audience, and this is a small audience. We're talking about maybe 30 or 40 people. And at the end of the talk, they would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I'm from such and such community organization, and you did a great presentation. I love your message, and we'd love to have you." And they would invite me over, and it went like that for quite some time. But yeah, those were my humble beginnings. I didn't even write a book at that point. I didn't even know I was a writer at that point. This was me just trying to make more sense of my life. And don't get me wrong. Let me also mention that At some point from 21 to 22 years old, I started going on the right path, and I started becoming, I became a productive member of society. I, uh, I integrated really well, and I started working, and I started raising a family, and I worked for about 22 years after that, um, and did quite well. I did so well that it didn't make sense, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Is that I finally came to realize as I started to climb the ladder and put a lot of work in, and I was the guy that was there early in the morning, the guy that was staying after work by a half hour, 45 minutes. I was thinking of work before I went to sleep. What moves am I going to make? I was being very strategic in my planning, on how I would continue to grow at work. And then I would wake up thinking the same thing, and then I would put it all into action once I got to work, finding ways and means to not redefine the company at the time I was working with, but how do I add value to this company, and how do I as an individual contribute so that we can continue to grow. And so that particular mindset got me to a point where I reached a really nice sized corner office, and I was in a six-figure salary. And this is when things didn't make sense anymore for me, because I reached the financial goals that I set out for, and it was not, what I came to find out is that it wasn't as fulfilling. There was something missing when I got to that point. And this is actually what propelled me, and this was another transformative stage in my life where I didn't want to trade my time for money anymore. And I see how people grasp onto the thought and belief that money is everything. And for a good part, money is a tool to be used, right? And you can get create some comforts, and you can enjoy some luxuries and do some things. There's no question about it. But at what point did I succumb and become at what point did I become the tool, right? I kind of lost myself in the chase of money, and I did all the right things. I hit all the right points, all the milestones, and I grew and I did really well. But it didn't make sense anymore. This life can't just be about money. There's so many cars that I could have that I can't drive them all at once. I can't live in three houses at one time. So what, so deep, again, going through some deeper introspection because something didn't seem right. Money wasn't as it was cracked up to be, is what I came to realize. And this is when I started to seek a deeper meaning to life. Right? This is when I started to say, well, am I just going to be a consumer, or am I going to be a contributor? Because all I'm doing is I'm living through selfish gains. The lenses that I'm wearing is just a selfish, what can I get out of this and how can I get ahead? And when I flipped that way of thinking, it was a simple switch that's so elusive. A lot of people, I didn't see it for so long, but if I flip that switch, but what is it that I can do that can help somebody else? And then I started to realize, and I started to feel this sense of fulfillment, that it's not about me. That, okay, Axel, you've gone through some stuff and you made sense out of your life, and God bless you. But now it's time to get back. That's where the sense of fulfillment of life comes for me. It's not it's no longer about the money. And some of my friends, a lot of my friends, they don't get this. I'm sort of like a sore thumb sometimes, because the casual conversations always revolve around, well, what do you do, and how much does that pay, and it all boils down to measuring financial wealth. And so I'm very elusive in a very nice way when it comes, because I don't like to talk about money, because a lot of times it boils down to lack, and I don't like to speak that language. I learned that limiting negative self-talk it holds me back. So if I speak a lack, I'm going to live in lack. You go visit your aunts, your family members, old friends, or even people you're just meeting, you're out for drinks or whatever. It's always well, what do you do? And it's always well, somebody's measuring somebody's measuring you. So, I always say, well, I'm a writer, I'm an author, and I do some speaking gigs, and I'm venturing into, but I never talk about finances. But people always want to get down to that. But just getting back to the point that I was making is that, when I finally got to what I thought was the pinnacle, it truly wasn't. It just opened up another door of a whole world that I didn't know about. And this is what I want the youth and other folks to, it doesn't have to be the young kids, grown folks. And listen, if you condition in a certain way of thinking, acting, and feeling, I want to share a fresh perspective for you. And what you do with it is totally on you. But I know that somewhere deep down inside, and I've gotten a lot of this on the through a lot of feedback, is that somewhere it ignites something. It provokes some deeper thought. It's sort of like just looking at something slightly different that people get the, oh my God, aha moment. I didn't even look at it that way.
How many books have you written in total? I do know that you have a new one out called Soulfire.
Yeah, so far we're at book 5 in the span of 5 years. And the first 2 books I've translated it into the Spanish version. So I guess that would count for 7 books. But yeah, in total, five books. And it started with the with Distorted Perception of Innocence. That was my first book back in 2018. This is when I started discovering that I'm a writer, just going back to what I had mentioned when you asked me the question, what's the advice you would give? I just started writing. There was a whole bunch of stuff in me. As a grown man, there was a lot of stuff in me that I had to purge myself from. I had to make sense of it. And so I decided this one summer to sit down, and I started writing. I started writing on a legal pad, and I said, well, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to, build a character. Am I the protagonist? Or how does this? And so anyway, I threw all those questions, and I put them up on the shelf, and I just said, just start writing. All right? Just start writing. Whatever's in your mind right now, just start writing. And so I sat down, and I started scribing on paper, and it took me back to when I was 5 years old. And before I know it, just to speed track it a little bit, I'm at chapter 20, and I'm telling myself, oh my God, I think I've written a book. And this was all based on my life coming up. It's a coming-of-age story. It's a narrative, nonfiction, confessional. I bear everything, the gunshot was just one of the traumas. There's a lot of other traumas that I've gone through that I put down there. And then I quickly followed up. I liked the feeling of writing. And so I said, well, after this, when this book is done, what are you going to do now? I said, well, let me write some more, but let me do the contrast to the here and now. And so I started writing about who I am at this very moment as the follow-up book, which was Questions Are the Answers. And it's a thought-provoking book that incites. Oh God, I was looking for this word. This is to stimulate and expand your self-awareness. It's like a book of self-reflection. It's a guidebook. There's questions and at the end of each chapter. So the really cool thing about it is that I had to expand the platform or expand in that platform. And I said, well, people are not really sitting down and reading. Market research is dictating that people are on the go and they would rather listen and audio, and they're doing a lot of audiobooks. And that's how we got to hook up. So I'm so glad that you was a part of this process for me, because your voice lends so much. It breathed another depth of life into the book, and so I feel that narrators are so important in how they contribute to the next level of literature with their audio production of literature. It just gives another depth, and another level of depth, and I think people can resonate even more because you got that voice, dude. You got this tonality to you that I still listen to it. By the way, you produced the book. You did such a great job with the audio version that I still listen to it.
You've done a lot of shows in the United States, and I know that you recently did a presentation in the Niagara region in Canada. Are you going to be doing any more shows outside of the United States, like say in Canada or maybe over in Europe somewhere one of these days?
Yeah, so my hope right now is to start marketing and doing shows in India, right? And why do I say India? My second book, Questions Are the Answers, were sold. They were purchased mostly by people in that part of the world. Oddly enough, they really, really resonated with Questions Are the Answers, and I think 95 to 98% of my readership for that book is in India. So at some point, maybe on a casual trip, or maybe just reaching out to make connections, I hope to reach that country, and then from there just kind of spread word of mouth. It always comes down to word of mouth and referrals and stuff like that. But yeah, India, I got some readers out there, man, that I'd love to come out and just do an in-person presentation.
Axel, you gave us a goldmine of inspiration and wisdom this week, and it was an absolute honor to have you on the show, and thank you so much. You, my friend, are awesome.
Blake, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be on this podcast. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the connection. I truly appreciate it.
And that was keynote speaker, motivational speaker, and author Axel Desarden. That's our show for this week, and remember, here at The Medley, we're all kinds of different.